We're up here chatting that we lost track of time. So we'll open the Board of Selectmen's meeting for today, Wednesday, March 6th. First item on the agenda is public comment. Is there any public comment? There being none, we'll move on to a review of the minutes for February 20th, 2019. What's the pleasure of the board?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Motion's made to accept the minutes as presented. There any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Next item on the agenda is a utility pole installation public hearing for Brook Street for National Grid and Verizon New England. Sir, if you would come up, sit down, and tell us your name, and we'll be happy to hear from you about this.
Good evening. My name is Diego Villarreal. I'm with National Grid. And the reason why I'm here is because pole 5-1 is currently located on private property on Brook Street. The pole is in bad shape, and we would like to replace and relocate the pole on town's right away. The reason why is because we would like to have easy access to the pole to minimize restoration time in case of a possible outage. I believe the pole feeds a commercial building, so minimizing the restoration time will be something we would like to do.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from members of the board?
Just, so where would the pole be located? Where the sidewalk is?
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
As far as away from the edge of the road, so we don't have any.
So you still have access to go
Exactly,
through the
yeah.
sidewalk, and if that sidewalk is hot top or concrete, you'll be replacing the hot top or
Absolutely,
the
yep.
concrete?
Yep,
If it's
absolutely.
concrete goes back into it?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Any other comments or questions? All right, there being none, this is a public hearing, so is there anybody here to testify in favor of this poll other than this gentleman? No? Anyone to testify against? No? Okay. I'll close the public hearing, and what's the pleasure of the board with regard to the request for the moving of the pole on Brook Street?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we grant the request for moving of the new utility pole relocation.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to grant the request to move the utility pole. There any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you
Thank you.
very much.
Good luck,
You're all
sir.
set, sir.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Next item on the agenda is the FY 2020 budget presentation for the Parks and Recreation Department. If you come up and say who you are, and we'll turn the floor over to you.
Good evening, this is Almila Osborne, Vice Chair, Clinton Parks and Rec at 180 Main Street. I just wanted to say hi to Mike Ward. It's nice seeing less of you, Mike.
Hey.
Just ran into you Saturday night at another function, and I was shocked in a good way.
Yeah.
A healthy town administrator means the town benefits as well, so congratulations. It's good to see you looking so well.
Emily Easterling, Director, Clinton Parks and Rec.
Hi, Emily.
Hi. So I know you guys all have the packet that I submitted in front of you, so I was just going to touch upon a couple things and then answer any questions if you have them. So FY 20 is slated to bring some significant changes for the town of Clinton and town departments, especially the Clinton Parks and Recreation Department. The addition of the Facilities Department makes our budget, and I'm sure a lot of other town budgets look different than they have in the past. Many of the facility-related costs that were previously requested by our department have now been wrapped into the Facilities Department, and we've been working with Facility Manager Mr. Russell Carlstead to identify which costs are incorporated into his budget versus ours, so I'm sure you'll see some of that when he presents his budget. So most significant to our budget is our request for a recreation coordinator. On the packet, we have a memorandum, I can never say this word.
Memorandum.
Memorandum from The Personnel Board, we spent the fall working with them on developing this job description and getting their support for the position. So I've also included the actual position in that packet. So we're requesting a part-time position based on grade 6, step 2, for 19 hours per week year-round, plus the cost of living once it's decided on by the town. During the summer, roughly 10 weeks, we're hoping that the position will work about 35 hours, and then the rest of the hours that are allotted for the year will be done during the year. A lot of towns do this, such as Leominster. That's where we based it up. We based our job description on in discussion with the Personnel Board. The more hours in the summer would help to cover the summer playground and teen adventure programs, which are very demanding programs that draw in a lot of kids from town, so we really need a reliable employee to be handling those. Before designating a portion of our budget to the facilities department, I was able to save about $16,900 from the overall budget for Parks and Rec, which pretty much covers that amount that we are asking for. I was able to do this by getting some grants and donations to cover a lot of the capital improvement work that we've been requesting in years past, so that was a positive change. Basically, having a designated recreation coordinator would help to keep consistent office hours. It would help to continue to expand programming, and most of all, ensure that our programming is offered with the highest attention to detail and coordination. It's very difficult to train people year to year and to keep that same level of excellence that the town is, expecting from our department. This position would be responsible for various seasonal programs and events, as well as having a lot of responsibility in the summer playground program. Other than the recreation coordinator, the other slight increase was to our recreation miscellaneous expense line. Due to increases in administrative needs to sustain recreation programs, this number has gone up slightly just with the cost of living. It covers the software we use to register for the programs. It covers upgrades to computers and, other recreation needs that the office has, so there was a slight increase there. Overall, we're not, actually not asking for any increase this year, given the change, so our budget is actually down 28.89%, which is fun, and usually we're in the other way, and you guys are saying we have to go down, so that was exciting to see. And then all of our capital project planning has been coordinated with the facilities manager, so we're not asking for any additional warrant items. He's gonna help us to continue the work that we already have started and to take the priorities that we've set as a board and a department and to move forward with some of the other projects we have. One of the projects we've been working on is doing some work at Carlisle Park and improving the sidewalks over there, as well as restoring the fountain at that park to bring it back to some of the glory days that people are used to see. So, that's our hope for the next year or two, is to work on that and secure funding for that. But other than that, it's a pretty straightforward ask, so I can answer questions if you have them.
Okay. Yolanda, you,
Yeah,
anything?
I'd like to say that, first of all, I think it's really exciting to have a facilities department. I see the value, I think our whole board does, the value of having a centralized department that's going to take care of the needs of the town with all the building interfacing that has to go on, whether it's getting a good contract for services that are needed, and the kind of needs that we have for somebody with somebody of Russ's skill set to do that for us, but also just the way it impacts our department and Emily and Rose's time, particularly Emily, the way that her time has been saturated with having to take care of these things, that takes that chunk of attention right out of, her, it doesn't have to be dealt with now by her particularly. So even though we're still setting policy and taking care of what has to be done on the parks and recreation side of things, the fact that it's getting handled, the minutia, the repairs, maintenance, and so forth, as of July, under facilities, that means that we can focus on the other parts of what we do in that department. So we're really happy about that, and we just want to commend Emily on what she's been doing all along, and the way that she's integrated recreation and parks leading up until this point, and having to carry both of those flames and keeping them running. I think a lot of the feedback we get in town is how beautiful everything looks. And actually, just to point out something like over at Torini's Corner, there was this moment of saying, gee, you know what, there's some overgrown stuff over there, there's this darkness to it, and a meeting was set up between our parks manager, Chris Becker, Emily, Russ, and I don't know who else was involved, but then we brought in our, the tree service that we needed, and I was driving by there one day, and I was like, wow, all of a sudden, you just see the light coming through, the brush cleaned up, and it's like, wow, that's a proud little corner that we have. And it's a significant intersection over there. So it's just, those kinds of things happening are just another, you know, you get a nice feeling when you realize you're part of that. And so even though we're handing the mantle over to Russ, and he's going to have a, you know, a plan with all of that, we are a little bit still hoping to see Savage Field completed in the things that we promised to the voters about seeing the parking finished and the lighting, which is almost going to be finished in the spring. It's going to happen. We know that's on the docket, but there's still things like the skateboard park that haven't been finished and so on. We know that's going to happen, but so once that's done, we'll feel a little bit better because we know we started that project even though we're not necessarily the ones finishing it as such, but we're happy to see that we're not the only ones pulling the concrete on that. And so we're really happy that the town is understanding that our mission as a board is to see recreation and parks enhanced and maintained as for the betterment of the community.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions from members of the board?
I
Mr.
do-
Sargent?
I do just have a question, and it's actually a public safety question.
Sure.
Depot Square, I noticed, is not shoveled or plowed. You folks at the Parks and Recs have a brand-new machine. I believe it's enclosed. There is a town bylaw that states the sidewalks are supposed to be shoveled, plowed, or whatever. Main Street is not plowed as we speak right now. So any
Street?
Main Street, Depot Square. So when you're walking on that sidewalk on
Oh, the
Main Street,
yep.
underneath the bridge, the DPW must have did it underneath the bridge, but why isn't that park done? Also, on High Street, where your building is, they do a great job shoveling, getting all that snow in front of your sidewalk, but you guys, or whoever, is pushing all that snow up. So how is that person supposed to get over that? Either it has to climb over that snow banking, or they have to walk into the road to get around it. And then, since you guys have a brand-new machine, why aren't you good neighbors and just go down to the other intersection and just come back and do the Fuller Field sidewalk? And then just one more last thing.
Okay, just making sure I understand, you're talking about the sidewalk that's in front of the Parks and Rec building that's on High Street that goes down to Fuller
Yes,
Field?
that's
Okay.
all nice and shoveled, but you push it all up forward, and then you have a big mound there. You're blocking access to continue straight on that sidewalk, so it's being plowed wrong. But I'm also saying, why don't you be a good neighbor and just continue down to the next intersection, just go in front of Fuller Field? They don't have an indoor sit-down machine to do the sidewalks. You guys do.
Okay.
So why not be a good neighbor? Then also, you guys maintain the park over by the police station. I noticed the side of the police station was shoveled, but the backside of that sidewalk is not shoveled.
Okay.
And you guys have a brand spanking new machine, and I'm just curious why.
I believe, and Emily, I'm sure you can handle this question, but I know I did ask our park manager about that. At one point, it had something to do with ice forming, and once ice forms, you cannot remove it, I believe, until it melts or something. I know I asked
Actually
Chris.
wasn't strong. We did do it after the last storm. There was a period where Hamilton Square wasn't plowed like it should have been. Our tractor, the hydraulics broke during that storm. And then the turn of events was, it was a day that it was pretty warm, everything melted, and then everything froze overnight, and our tractor wasn't strong enough to push all that ice. We can't take our plow truck on those sidewalks. They're not wide enough. So as soon as it got warm enough and it snowed again, we did take the plow over to Hamilton, and so it should be good now, and I can double check tomorrow. I can bring up pushing the snow even further on Fuller Field, on that sidewalk. And now that you've brought it to our attention, I can address it with our park manager. In terms of the police station, I don't know if you can clarify what you mean
But the
over
police
there,
station, you maintain that the corner, correct?
All right, nailed, coming into town with the sign is?
Yep.
The little
So you-
triangle.
You guys maintain it, so you guys maintain the sidewalk, in my opinion.
It's in front of the
I
sign.
don't know
believe.
that our park manager ever, or myself ever knew to plow that sidewalk, so we've had some transition, and I will definitely address it with him
Thank
going
you.
forward, so that he can, put that on his list.
But the other thing too that's happened is we were asked, our department was asked to help out at the senior center plowing all the sidewalks there, so we were very happy to do that, especially, I think it was more than once.
We've done it pretty much all winter, so
Yeah.
some of the time we have had in the past to do some of these smaller areas, we've helped the other town buildings when we are able to.
But especially the senior center, because if they don't have cleared sidewalks, they can't open
Yeah,
their
they're like
building.
priority number, we do our building and then their building, so that the seniors can get in and out safely and make sure that no one
Sure.
gets hurt there, so.
And I appreciate it,
Yeah.
just if we
Yeah.
can correct
No,
that for the
that's
future.
absolutely on the
Thank
docket.
you.
It is a good question, and we should be able to handle it, especially where we have the equipment and so forth.
But we'll hope there's no more snow this year and we'll move
Exactly.
forward.
When we all put that order in.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Conley.
As usual, I wanted to compliment the Parks and Recreation and Emily on the budget presentation. I haven't had time to go through it, but as usual, it's a very well thought out, clear document for us to be able to review your priorities. I also want to compliment the commission under Emily's leadership, the overall recreation program in town. It's exciting to me to be in the neighborhood or coming in here for a meeting and during the summer and the fall and seeing all the activities that are running in Central Park. I know that's only a small part of what you do, but it's about building a sense of community here, and I think you've been doing a great job.
Thank you.
That all said, I have a question that Joanna sort of put in my head.
Yep.
And I also want to compliment you for what appears to be a very cooperative process, or supporting the process of moving to the facility department, a section of your department. And I want to compliment you on that, too. But Joanna brought up the point of the tremendous amount of work, the big chunk, I think she called it, that is part of your daily business of managing the parks as well, and how that's going to free you up and make things better for the recreation side. I'm sort of see a conundrum there in that you're gaining all this, not free time, but this intellectual time that you could dedicate to something else. Why now, at this point, at this juncture, should we be supporting the third person in the recreation department?
Can I answer, or do you want to take it first?
I can go first.
Okay.
So we've actually asked for this position for several years. Working with the personnel board this year, we rebranded it a bit so that it's more comprehensive of what this person would actually be doing. Even though like some of the facility side won't be directly, under me, and what I've gathered and talking to Russ about the way things are gonna go, I don't necessarily lose that chunk of work. He still said that, myself and our board are the vision makers, if you will, so we're, where I don't have to worry about, like a tree that falls in Central Park as closely and be out there taping things off and doing that sort of thing. I can now look at the bigger picture a little bit better and work, to get improvement plans in place for all the other parks so that we can make changes, across the board at all the parks and improvements there. I can focus my time on applying, for different grants to help fund that, so we're not asking the town for money consistently. I do plan on still working closely with Russ, so he knows the vision that I have and the board has that we've worked for the last couple years to really keep the momentum going, and so that the park side isn't forgotten, because he has a lot on his plate as well. So, someone has to represent, that portion of it. This position is to help with not only just, the office stuff. We have a lot of stuff that's after hours. We have a lot of late nights. We have weekends that you do need supervisors at. And currently, it's just 2 people trying to cover all of that and still maintain normal office hours. So this person helps to even all of that out. And, especially with a program like the Summer Playground and Teen Adventure program, with it being so crucial to town and being in the care of so many kids. I mean, people are dropping off their kids and, you want their welfare to be into consideration. I don't trust that program with, just a high schooler. You need somebody that has the background that we dictate, that has the confidence to do the job and to make sure that they know, all the rules around a summer program like that, and having consistency in that person year to year will go a long ways and really help give parents confidence when they drop their kids
Absolutely.
off.
Yeah, we
Thank you.
also don't, this is about taking care of our employees too. Emily and Rosa are providing leadership in what they do in their skill set. We're trying to deal with, Rosa particularly is responsible for marketing our department and planning. Both of them do event planning, and like there's off-site meetings they go to and so forth. So we're looking at a 35-hour week, but there's much more that happens. So we're talking about sometimes upwards of 50-hour weeks that they put in, and having a rec coordinator, is it? Rec coordinator, taking and alleviating that, I don't know, that degree of just below the more, anyway, taking the pressure off by having the more sub-level activity being taken on by them frees them up to not have to do all that work all the time, and gives them the oversight they need to function in that capacity. But and yet then we know that other work is getting done anyway, but not necessarily by them. So there's more of a managerial freedom that they can operate in and not get tied down always in the first level all the time of having to execute everything and be in charge. It's a win-win for us as a department. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Any other questions or comments from members of the board? There being none, thank you very much for your time and your...
Thank you for hearing
I agree
us.
with Mr. Connolly. Your budget is always very well prepared and easy to understand, and we thank you for that.
We absolutely appreciate Emily's foresight and acumen in doing that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next item on the agenda is the school department. The school department requested to meet with us regarding an application to the Massachusetts School Building Authority for funding to conduct a feasibility study on building conditions at Clinton Middle School. The superintendent of schools has contacted Michael and asked that that item be deferred until next week, and so with the permission of the board, we'll table that discussion and move on to the next item on the agenda, which is Ms. Franny Hodge and the Greenway Trust Central Mass Rail Trail update.
I brought just a few handouts so I could
Thank you.
give you
Thank you,
some
Franny.
notes to go by while I'm talking. I didn't bring all the slides again, so I hope you
Thanks,
remember
Mary.
what we're talking about. Thanks. So when I met with you, I guess it was January now, I did say I would come back sooner rather than later to give you an update on progress. So the item that we were talking about is the development of the Mass Central Rail Trail in Clinton. And Mr. Yakabuchi, I think you might not have been at the meeting when I presented before, but as you might remember from when we started talking about this in 1998 or 99 in the open space planning process.
Many years ago, yes.
Yeah, we're still trying to acquire this section of trail. So the first part of it, what I handed out is just a reminder of what we were talking about. It's 0.7 of a mile section of trail, and for Clinton, it connects the Rauscher Farm and the Maffei property and the Woodlands open space, as well as connects us to the DCR on the other side. So at the time I met here, we were still negotiating a price with the railroad and trying to figure out what our next steps would be. Since that time, we have agreed on a price with the railroad, and we're now going back and forth with the red line of a purchase and sale agreement. We've also applied for a grant to get an inspection of the tunnel completed, because we want to understand the usability of the tunnel prior to closing on the actual rail bed property. So as part of the purchase and sale agreement, we'll have a phase 1 environmental review of the trail, as well as the inspection of the tunnel. And we have until October 31st of 2019 to finish that due diligence relative to the purchase. We did agree on a price of $10K per acre, and we agreed on time to raise the funds to purchase it until December of 2020, so it gives us almost 2 years. The last thing that we're still negotiating in the purchase and sale, they essentially accepted what we had put in the red line that we gave to them, except that we basically had said, depending on the outcome of the inspection of the tunnel, we'll want to remove that section. And they said they don't want to remove that section, they want to sell the whole parcel as a whole. So I think what we would like to do is say, well, then it's not worth the same amount of money, because it's, it's almost 3 acres that we wouldn't be able to use if it's not usable. And so that's pretty much the last item that we need to close on with them. In the terms of the purchase and sale, at the end of due diligence, if we had not made a decision not to go forward, then we would forfeit our deposit. So that's another timing thing that we're trying to keep in mind. And we agreed on a $5,000 deposit. We wanted to make it as modest as possible to not risk as much money up front. So, what I'm asking for relative to support, and we talked a little bit about this the last time I was here, is that we do have some funds available in the Greenway Trust, but we are a small nonprofit. So for some grant reimbursements, for some grants, it's on a reimbursement basis. So particularly related to this project, we'd like to partner with the town on the acquisition component of the rail bed. So similar to the way the town did the project with the 40 Caves parcel, where Sudbury Valley trustees basically did the paperwork for grants and applications and things like that. But the town agreed to assist with the upfront payment for the property, with the reimbursement from the grant, and then with the nonprofit paying for the matching funds. So we're looking at doing that type of a partnership with the town on the acquisition. So I realize something like that, I believe, would need to go to town meeting for a vote. And we're probably a year away from that because we don't know the results of the phase 1 inspection yet. So we wouldn't know until after we complete those first steps whether or not it's something we definitely intend to go forward with. And then we would be in another grant cycle for applications for the acquisition of the property. So I did, on the last piece of information, kind of give you an outline of what we see the budget as right now. Relative to the tunnel inspection, we got a couple of quotes prior to doing our grant application that were in the 50 to 60K range for the inspection of the tunnel. At the time of doing the application, we have to have a good estimate. If we are awarded the grant, then we'll have to get 3 formal proposals before we can actually move forward with one. The budget that we estimated that on was basically an engineering firm that's done a lot of work with the Mass Department of Transportation. So they gave us really clear outline of what they were going to do and the deliverables and what costs what relative to the inspection. So we felt pretty happy with that. Relative to that grant, we would pay for the phase 1 environmental review. We're looking to the grant for 43K of the inspection, and then the Clinton Greenway Conservation Trust would provide the match in cash and labor relative to the rest of the funds for that inspection. So again, that's somewhat of an estimate because once we get final proposals, it may vary, but we're basically planning on something in the 50 to 60K range as being a complete and comprehensive inspection that will give us information that we can move forward with. Relative to the acquisition, the price that we've agreed on, if we move forward with purchasing all, it's 11.04 acres, would be $110,400. We will need to get an appraisal due to the requirements of the grants that you have to make sure that it's actually worth what you're paying for it. Previously, I'd gotten a quote on appraisals for that type of property, and it's in the 10K range. Part of the complication is there's lots of abutters, and they have to look at things like they go across the fence to come up with the exact value for the property. So that, again, is an estimate, but I think it's probably in the ballpark of what we would need to do. And the closing costs, we think, are going to be in somewhere around the $4,000 range. So, so the total budget related to the acquisition portion is $124,400, based on how we've estimated it right now. And then we would apply for a grant to cover the cost of it. The match has to be somewhere in the 20% range for most of the grant applications. So that's kind of where we are now.
Any questions from members of the board?
I have one, and I just wanted to thank you, Frank, for putting all this together. I know it's a pretty daunting task, so I wanted to thank you. I just had a question on the tunnel part of it, where Pan Am saying they're not gonna separate with the tunnel.
Yeah.
How's that, if we do buy it, how's that work if that parcel is not included in that? Is that something we go around? I mean, how's that work?
Yeah, so the reason that we want to do this inspection before we move forward with the acquisition is we don't know whether that piece of the trail is going to be usable. So, for example, if when it's inspected, they find out that the structure is just not sound in any way, and that there wouldn't be a way to remediate any issues with the tunnel, so that it wouldn't be safe for people to pass through it, then we would have to put another path through to continue that trail onto the, over to the DCR part of the property. And there are other parcels of open space where a different trail could be developed. So,
Okay.
for example,
So we
you would-
could tie into that, sorry to interrupt, just wanted, we could tie into that if that tunnel's not in use. I mean, it's old, that's what I was thinking, that it's probably
Yeah.
not safe, I mean.
Yeah, so, I mean, I have to say, the first time that I went through it, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I thought, wow, it seemed really structurally sound,
Yeah.
it seemed really good.
Yeah,
But it's been, you know, nothing's happened in that time frame. So now I'm not as confident as I would have been back in that time frame, because there's some water that comes through, and there's a lot of wet area at the clamshell road into the tunnel. But again, a couple of the people had looked at the pictures that we had of it, and at least one firm came out and went through the tunnel to see what it was like, and they said, you know, there are lots of things you can do to remediate this issue related to the water coming into the tunnel.
shore it up, yeah. Okay. And the inspection would be done by October 31st of this year?
Yeah, so we should know in the next 60 days whether or not we get the grant. If we get the grant, then we could begin work in July, and the time frame for them to complete was something like 6 weeks total. So I was kind of putting a little bit of lead time on the beginning and the end to make sure that we had enough time to get it completed and have an understanding of the results.
So what would they be inspecting? I mean, because it's going to be a rail trail, so what would they be looking, do you know offhand, like what the inspection includes, like briefly? Or like?
Yeah, so one of the challenges in the tunnel relative to doing the inspection is to basically be able to access everything in the tunnel structure.
Okay, so this is more of the tunnel they're going to be inspecting?
Yep,
Okay,
yep,
okay.
absolutely, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so one of the challenges there is because it's so wet at at one end, and there's not really easy access to the
Right.
trail.
But isn't that a moot point if Pan Am doesn't want to sell us the tunnel anyways?
No, they don't
Well,
want to
they
sell it
want-
without it.
They don't want to
Without
sell
it.
the
They don't want to
property
exclude
Gotcha.
it.
without the
So
tunnel.
basically, we
Gotcha.
wanted to say, we
Okay.
finished the tunnel inspection, if we can't use it, then we don't want it. And they said, well, it's either an all or nothing
Gotcha,
for this
okay.
piece of the
All right.
parcel.
Thanks.
So
All right.
our view is, well, if we can't use it, but we have to include it,
Okay.
then it's not worth the same amount of money.
Yeah.
Because there's,
Right, yeah.
you know, roughly 3 acres that we can't use.
Well, I can't speak, I'm not just speaking for myself here. I mean, I hope this goes through. I think it'd be really great for the town. It's a long time coming. And I think, I talk to people from different parts of the state, and when you talk about the rail trail, there's always this disconnect in this area and some other areas in the past 20 years. Those areas probably might have been filled in by now, because it's been such a long window. So I hope everything goes smoothly. I know I'm gonna support it. I hope it really pans out, because I think this would be a benefit for town, bringing new people into town and exploring Clinton through the rail trail. So I think it's great, and I hope it finally comes to fruition. I give you a lot of credit for sticking with it for all these years. So thank you.
You know, it has been a long haul.
Yeah, a lot of work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything? Yes, Mr. Conley.
Couple of questions, Fran. There's a lot of, like, individual grant money identified in your funding mechanism.
Right.
How likely or how comfortable are you that you would be able to get those grants?
Yeah, so we'll know about the first one in the next couple of months. It is a priority for the Department of Conservation and Recreation, and they've called it out to complete this particular trail. So we're optimistic, since we've not applied for anything relative to this, basically statewide trail, that will be successful. The other thing is that once they've invested something in it to do one section of trail, they want you to finish it. So we think the next one will be successful as well, because again, we haven't used funds for an acquisition of any component of this trail in Clinton, and I think they would see it as a good connector. So I'm sort of basing, the first part is hopefully the first one successful. If for some reason that's not successful, then we might do some kind of a scaled down inspection of the tunnel. It wouldn't be as comprehensive and might not give us as much information about what the next steps would be, but we want to at least get some assurance that it's going to be usable before we proceed with that. On the second part, because we do have some time to raise other grants and some things like that, we will pursue other funding organizations. But specific to these kinds of trails in Massachusetts, the Recreational Trails Grant Program has been one that's funded most of these kinds of projects. So that's kind of what I'm basing it on in what I've presented to you.
Okay, Fran, you also identify your own funds in a couple of line items.
Yes.
Where does the 14,000 and the 24,000
Yeah.
come from? Is that fundraising?
Yeah, so we actually already have most of those funds. So we have roughly, so specific to what we've raised for the rail trail, we have like $33,500. And then we have another $4,000 or so that's they're unrestricted funds that we potentially could use. But the reality is, we don't want to wipe out our bank account. So we will do additional fundraising activities, and we will go to other funding sources to basically build that up.
Well, that's all great. I too applaud you for what is it, 20?
It's
20
been-
years?
Yeah, it's been roughly 20 years. Yeah.
I applaud you for your diligence. I applaud you for the effort you've put into this, and the other people who are supporting you. And I think it's a great thing for the town, and I support it 100%.
Thanks very much. And certainly has not been me by myself.
I understand that, but you're here.
Many people on that side of the table have been quite supportive as well.
Anything, Mr. Carrigan?
What's next? What do you need from us?
Well, so I guess I would like for you to take some kind of a motion that say you're supportive of the idea of the town helping with the acquisition. I think we can't formally go ask the town at town meeting for another year, because I don't have answers to the questions that people are gonna ask. Is the tunnel in or out? What's the next steps? Have
Right.
you applied for the grant? All those things, we have to get the results of this, this phase one review before we know how to answer those questions more, without being, we think this is what's gonna happen, a little bit more clearly.
Well, Mr. Chair, I would make a motion, if it's appropriate, that the board endorse the continued effort to acquire this property and complete the rail trail through Clinton.
Second.
I'll second.
Motion's made and seconded to express this board's support for the continuing efforts of the Clinton Greenway Trust in the formation of a Central Mass Rail Trail. There any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried.
Thanks very
Well,
much.
Thank
you.
I wouldn't want people to think here that you've been laboring these 20 years in futility trying to get this rail trail. I mean, I do know that the Greenway Trust was instrumental in the Rocher Farm acquisition, and also very active in the 40 Caves acquisition. So you've accomplished a lot. The rail trail is tough. I mean, the railroads are a little tough to deal with. They got the land for
Well, and
nothing.
it's one of
And
those
now
things
they-
that we work on pretty hard for a little while, and then you kind of hit a roadblock and
Yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
you step back and try to figure out what's another way to attack the problem.
And that seemed to be with this specifically, dealing with the railroads and their property, they're tough to deal with, so again, I give you a lot of credit. People
Yeah,
understand.
and that's part of the reason we want to lock in a purchase and sale agreement, because we thought we had raised the money that they wanted a couple years ago, and then it turned out, well, that wasn't the price anymore, so,
Yeah, you changed your mind.
yeah. It is real estate, so.
Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Franny.
Next item on the agenda is administrative business, but there are no items in this matter, so we'll move on to old and new business. First item in old and new business is the FY 2018 Town Audit Engagement Agreement with Mr. Bill Freyer, CPA. Michael?
Just briefly, Mr. Chair, this is just a renewal of a services agreement with our current auditor to provide our annual financial statements for the town. As the board remembered, a year ago, we were looking to change firms, but that didn't work out so well. So Mr. Freyer stayed on to do our FY17. That document has been kind of completed in a draft form. We're hoping over the next week or so that we'll have a final that I can share with the board on that one. But that puts us a year behind. Right now, we should be starting our FY18 because of those issues we had. We're behind. So Mr. Freyer has indicated that he will stay on and immediately start that FY18 right now, so that we'll have that done this spring. And then that will catch us up until we're done with this fiscal year at the end of June. So we appreciate him staying on. He was hoping to kind of cut back a little on his workload. And also, we have a single audit piece of our financials because of all the federal grants that we receive at the school and through economic development. And that has a lot of regulations and parameters that come with it. And we're the only community that he does that with the single audit. So he was hoping to kind of, move on from that, and he wouldn't have to kind of be involved in that federal piece of it. But he would say he has graciously stayed on to help us through this FY17, and will complete 18 and get us caught up this spring. So the fee is the same as that he charged last year, is the same that he charged when he was on a 3-year agreement with us previous. So we work very well with him, and we appreciate him being here to help us out to get this done.
Okay. Do you need a motion to approve this?
Yes, please.
Okay.
So
moved,
moved,
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman?
Second.
Motion's made and second to agree to approve the town audit engagement agreement with Mr. Bill Freyer, CPA. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Ward, just so people understand, as far as getting caught up, does he give us a timetable as far as when 18 would be done? And then where do you see going forward as far as putting this back out to bid, I guess?
Right, FY18, it's generally about a 3-month process, so we should be able to have something, like I said, probably at the late spring. At the end of this fiscal year, we should have that one done. Then going into the summer, we would then probably have to look at probably going out to bid or getting proposals from other firms to get us ready for FY19. Generally, they start their background work in the fall time period. If they get it done quickly, we could have it around the holidays, or no later than generally February or March, because we do have reporting requirements by March 31st that we have to do with the federal government, with the state, with our financial institutions, continuing disclosures that we have to do with the banks. So that all happens around this time period right now. So our hope is to get something around the holidays or shortly thereafter. So once we close the books on 18, and then we come to the end of fiscal 19, we'll probably need to start looking at proposals for the board this summer to get a new firm on board.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? There being no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. The items, TCR grant for flood protection in Clinton and the EOEA grant for environmental remediation at 329 High Street. We have not yet received the scope of work, so with the permission of the board, we will table that for this evening and schedule it for our next meeting.
I just have one comment though, Michael. I understand we can't clean up the whole National River for $50,000, but is there any way we can maybe spend $1,000, put somebody in a canoe and pick up the bottles going down the National River? Because I've noticed, you know, down by High Bridge or there's trees wherever on National Street, all the bottles are clinging to the down trees in the water. I understand we can't clean up. It's gonna cost millions to clean up the whole National River in Clinton, but can we please clean up the litter?
Sure, yeah, I'll definitely take a look, and I'll talk to Mr. McGowan this week and see, you know, we can try and get as much as we can. Like you said, there probably isn't enough money to do the whole river, but I'd like to see at least the major logger jams that we try to address. I know they were concentrating initially where we had a lot of problems during the flooding around Green Street, but all the way down the river, there's felled trees and it's starting to collect debris. So, yeah, so whether we can do through this grant or maybe efforts that we can do through the town going forward, at least this will give us a good idea of the amount of the scope of work that needs to be done, and we'll see how much money this can get, and then maybe there's something that the town could maybe match at town meeting or budget to do further down, because it is becoming an issue. I knew the DCR has concerns as well as ourselves. I think it's something, it's a good time, the state's putting up some money, but it's a good time to address some of this before we have another problem that we did a number of years ago. So, thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay. Next item on the agenda under old and new business is goals and objectives. Is there anything to report on goals and objectives? I have something to report on the street light, but we can do that under committee reports. If there's nothing on goals and objectives, do any members have any old and new business they want to introduce?
No, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure whether it would be under old or new business or under committee reports, but I would like to ask the board's permission to reconvene the Oxford Court Subcommittee specifically for the purpose of developing a parking plan that's complete and continual and helps enforce the agreed to rules and regulations for the use of the municipal parking lot.
Okay.
Mike, I am on that committee, but if we can make that after 3:30 or after.
Sure.
Does it have to be reconstituted? Was it disbanded?
No, I'm just asking, it was never disbanded.
Oh, all right,
but
so we can just,
I would just like to get another authorization from the board to reconvene
okay.
that group.
Well, can we have a motion?
That's a motion.
Second, our motion's made and seconded to reconvene the Oxford Court Parking Group. There any motion being made and seconded? Any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Next item on the agenda is committee reports. Are there any committee reports?
Mr. Chair, yeah, just under the Cable Committee and Selectmen, Kerrigan sits on this too, so if you want to jump in, Sean, add anything to it, by all means. I'll be brief. We met actually 2 meetings. We had a meeting on February 27th and then again yesterday, March 5th. So we talked about content on the February 27th meeting. We also had executive session on, we discussed, it was about the contract coming up that's expiring later this year. Open session, we talked about, content, what can we get on the channels, that type of thing, getting people, the students up there involved, the curriculum, those type of things, kind of transferred into the, carried over into the March 5th meeting. We had the superintendent of schools there, along with the school committee member as well. And again, discussing things like live content for the school committee. And obviously more getting it, setting up something so we have volunteers or kids that are, students that are going to be filming this and, you know, filming more general government meetings, that type of thing. So it's not only school committee and selectmen, that it's going to be eventually all the boards and throughout the town. So if Sean had anything to add to that.
No, it's good.
The downtown street lighting group met last Wednesday, and we're continuing to working on the plans for replacing the street lights and poles on High Street. I would say that the major decision that got made last Wednesday was to go on a scheme to have the lights parallel to one another. There's various patterns you can use in putting up lights. We looked at the various options, and it seemed that, you know, a light on this side of the street and a light on that side of the street parallel to each other seems to be the way to go. We also generally decided on the type of fixture and street and pole. It'd be sort of a Victorian. We haven't actually picked out the fixture or the pole, but you know, we've ruled out very modern-looking poles and something in keeping with the structure of the town. The other thing that was discussed at some length was the trees. I'm an anti-tree person. I think the consensus of the committee is to do without the trees regularly spaced, but there is some desire for some green space down there, so we're going to be looking at those options, and we're also looking at property lines and things of that nature. So, and we do plan to be coming to town meeting this year with a proposal to fund new poles and streetscape down on High Street. So I'm sure we'll be here with a thorough proposal before that. Any other committee reports?
Mr. Chair, the Marketing and Communications Subcommittee met on the 26th of February. I'm still very happy with the enthusiasm that the committee members are showing. We talked about a lot of things. We're going to be sponsoring a townwide cleanup day in advance of the Memorial Day Parade on May 18th. We'd love to consolidate any other efforts that are being planned, so if you have any interest in that or participating, can contact me or Terry Angano, and we'll be spreading word out a lot more about that. It's May 18th, again, rain or shine. The more we talk about things, and it's something I'd love some guidance from the board to think about going forward. We talked a lot about the snow removal, and we talked a lot about just general public affairs, public relations, and I guess handling snow removal first. I think everyone knows how the routine goes, and I'm as guilty as anybody that, you know, when the snow comes and it doesn't work, we complain, and then, you know, we're slow to act, and then the winter's over, and then we forget about it. So I think what we thought was the best idea going forward was to maybe look at what we want out of snow removal in town, and that includes bylaw enforcement as far as residents and building owners and business owners clearing sidewalks, but also things like what the town should be responsible for, whether, you know, it's clearing, you know, if a business moves the snow to the curb at High Street, do we come through and take that out? Frankly, I don't know the challenges that are involved in I mean, I know what I would like, but I don't know what challenges are involved in clearing corners so that sidewalks and intersections are accessible, or getting that band of snow off of a main thoroughfare so that you don't have to walk a block to cut in. So I don't know if it's too late in the budget process to look at what we want and how much it would cost, so we can make some educated decisions on, you know, if we want to enforce a bylaw, would it take, you know, how many hours for a police officer? Again, I don't know what it takes to get things done, but I do know that I've seen it a couple times now where I get upset, and then things, you know, it's summertime, and then we move on to other things, and then wintertime comes, and it's just a cycle of nothingness. So if it's not a priority of the board, or if it's not a priority of people in town, then I'll move on to other things, but I don't know if it's something we want to, if everybody wants to think about, we can bring it up next time. You know, if it's, I personally think that if, you know, the bylaws, I mean, in a perfect world, the bylaws would be enforced and that the sidewalks would be clear, the people responsible for doing it would do it. In that perfect world, the town is responsible for a good deal of the property in town. As Mr. Sargent brought up, you know, we could look at, you know, the parks, we could look at the police station, we could look at, you know, what we're doing and not doing right. So I think we could certainly do a better job setting a good example, but I also think that we could look at, if we're going to ask business owners to frankly do something that a lot of them don't do, or you know, people on Water Street we talked about, it's different for them because the sidewalks weren't always there. If we're asking people to move toward a higher standard, maybe we could meet them halfway, and you know, if you're gonna, and it'll cost something. I just don't know the best next step as far as figuring out how much it would cost, so we can tell people, hey, you know, this is what we want, this is what it's gonna cost, and where we go from there. Same thing with the public affairs. We talked about it, and we had, you know, we have a lot of good ideas, but frankly, what I'd love to get away from is personality-based solutions, where we get some person who's gung-ho on something and they take care of it, and then maybe they get bored or get another job or get frustrated, and then we've got a level of service that now has to go away. I'd love to find a way to, if there's something we think is important, to find a way to get that done, you know, professionally. So, you know, we talked about getting, you know, a newsletter, or you know, the new website, filling that with content about good things. And, you know, honestly, there are people on our subcommittee who could do that, but we're all concerned that that would be our second or third or fourth jobs, and how good would the town be served? So that was another thing where we're trying to look at what value we can provide to the town and what cost it's going to be. So, I mean, again, personally, being on the cable, you know, we've been talking a lot about the future of cable, talking a lot about the future of public affairs, whether there's a solution there that combines the two, whether we look at that cable channel as kind of an outlet for getting word out about something, and finding a way to be creative about staffing where it's somebody who can work with people in town hall and getting the word out about things, working on FOIA requests, working on, you know, grant things. Again, it's something that I'm still getting my head around, but I just wanted to keep you guys posted that, you know, I'm big on, and I think I've spoken, you know, informally about professionalizing what we do here. You know, we're fortunate that we have a town administrator to help our board. The school committee has a superintendent. I would love to, you know, and the facilities director seems to be getting good results there. We've got an HR person in the
Works.
Yes, thank you. So I'm just trying to look at my priorities and how they align with what the town wants and what this board wants, and how we can maybe line up professional people, whether it's a town planner or a downtown manager, to take care of things so that we don't have to rely on people, you know, who are volunteering on boards, who are elected on boards, who might go away at some point, where we can get somebody who's professional in there to create a more consistent, long-standing solution, I guess. So that's my very long way of saying that I can come up with some ideas, but I just wanted I didn't want this to come out of left field. That I think if we want to be serious about snow removal, we should look at what it's going to cost to get what we want. And so if you guys want to think about, you know, what you want, I'm not looking, you know, for a blank check or anything, but I just think, I've seen it a couple times now, we can yell and scream, we can send out a notice, but if we're not going to enforce it, it's not going to mean anything. If we're not going to do anything, it's not going to do anything. I'm repeating myself now, but just putting that on the radar, I guess, and I'll try and collect my thoughts a little more succinctly next time, and we'll keep at it. But I'm thrilled with what our committee's coming up with. They're bringing a lot to the table, and I'm very happy to work with them. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Selectman Kerrigan is right, and I want to thank Selectman Kerrigan for his work. And I believe that all the sidewalks should be shoveled, but do you really think the manager down McDonald's knows the town of Clinton has the town bylaw that they're supposed to do the sidewalks? No.
No, and it is going to be a culture change.
We need to educate them. We said this a year ago, if not longer. I'm just throwing that out there.
No. We agree 100%, but we wanted to make sure that, at this point in the season, I want to start thinking about this over the summertime so that we're
Yep.
sending this out and we're not behind, but I also want to put teeth in it, even if that's like the first step, where we send out something to everybody, here's what we expect of you. If we're going to serious, not this past storm, it was, whatever the storm was before this 26th meeting, we had a dinky storm, I think on President's Day. Worcester handed out, I think they towed 470 cars. And that's how they got it done. So it's something, I know people are hesitant to do that here, but if it's something we're serious about, then that's going to take additional resources. If we're going to go out, and we let people know what the standards are, and they don't meet those standards, we either have to put teeth in that, or I don't see any point in, telling them the standards. I mean, it might get a certain degree of improvement. I know we were thinking about that when we changed the parking ban to give people a year or two to get used to it. But at some point, if we're still not happy with it, we're going to have to make a change. And that's, whether that's, I don't know who hands out the tickets, who, collects the tickets, who does the towing. That's just something I'd like to think about, and I'm sure it's going to be a multi-year thing. But I just wanted to start, we have a draft of something to send out, which I think, it's my fault that it's this late in the game. But looking ahead, when we send something out, I just want to have something to back that up. So, again, hopefully we're through winter now, or almost through it, but looking forward, that's certainly our first step. And we've got, we're working with the DPW, and I've got somebody on my committee who's already drafted something. I just wanted to let you guys know that we're already thinking the next step, that when McDonald's doesn't do it, and again, nothing against McDonald's, how are we gonna slap the wrist? So, we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, they're all valid points, and that's my thing, when we talked about that on the committee, Sean, about, notifying and all that, and we talked about it last year too, about notifying, and I think they're both valid points the board brings up. It's, we give people due process, and then, then after so much time, then we do enforcement. That's something the board has to take consideration of, that's what we want to do. But we need to do something. I mean, we can give all the due process we want, but if someone doesn't want to do it, if there's no teeth in it, there's no enforcement, they're not going to do it.
I don't want to blindside anybody, and I think part of that is, what the town can do better. I think we should lead by example. We certainly don't have any high ground to stand on when it comes to snow removal in a lot of cases. So I think, we need to look at what we could do better, how we could set a better example, and then how we could, as a last resort, I would hope, increase enforcement for the people who are still, outliers. I think it's a lot, as we've covered here before, it's a lot more complicated than people think, and I just would love to see a little bit of traction on this, and I think that happens more in the summertime than us hitting the panic button. And again, no one hits the panic button harder than I do on these things, but, if we haven't done anything by the time the next snow comes around, I will hold myself to blame. I just want to let you guys know that I'm going to keep bringing this up and hopefully have some solutions that we can vote on.
Just to chime in, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yeah.
I know Clinton isn't Worcester, but Worcester has a very rigid snow removal.
Right.
From in front of property, rules and regulations, and from personal experience, on a project in the city, and it only took one storm for us to get a citation. And
Yep.
we've had the sidewalks clear every storm afterwards.
One way to do it.
So it's not something to shy away from, because in the end, you're gonna need to get tough with the people,
Right.
or we're not gonna need to get tough if this is truly something we want to accomplish.
Yeah, that's, I guess, what I'm going at. Like, if that's what we want to do, then we got to start putting some teeth in it.
I think we're at the point where we, sorry to interrupt, but I think we're at the point where we know what we need to do, we just need to do it.
So,
my opinion.
just so, and again, this is on me, like, would it be worth asking the DPW superintendent to come up with some, some proposals, or what do you think would be a good next step? Like, if we wanted, like, I would love to see us build out from High Street, because if business owners, in my opinion, get it to the curb, and it's still a 2-foot mound, and you only get breaks every block, that doesn't really help foot traffic it's supposed to be a walkable downtown. So, I don't know the challenges involved in taking a Bobcat down to 5 AM and taking that out. Like, I don't know if there's a challenge with getting rid of snow. I don't know where, and I'm sorry to be ignorant, but I don't know where we put our snow. And it's a small town with, so would it be worth, when he has a chance, having the DPW superintendent, give him some time to think about this and come in and give us some options? I don't know if it's too late for this budget season, but just to see what we're up against, because I don't want to spring it on him either, saying, hey, we shouldn't have, you should be able to get in the park. You should be able to, get into the Strand without going down to Church Street, so I don't know what's involved in making that happen. So is it worth, what are the mechanics here? Do we,
I think it's a great idea, asking Chris for ideas and getting his feedback on it.
And I don't think it's too late for this budget cycle. If there's money involved and it's in the DPW budget for the town.
and if we have to chip away at it?
For us to do fulfill our responsibility, I think that's necessary before we start asking residents to do it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
And if it means money in the budget, it's something we have to consider.
Okay. So, Mike, what's the best course of action there?
Well, I think as the board started this tonight with budget hearings, we'll be having all departments will be coming in. And so I can ask Mr. McGowan if he's prepared next meeting or one thereafter, however long it takes, that when he comes for his budget, to be prepared to discuss some of these issues. And I think where the board is talking, it's a multi-faceted approach as well, not just a one answer, whether it's enforcement or whether it's equipment or personnel, but also priority about what you want to address.
Right.
So obviously we're talking town properties, downtown, major artery roads, or not. What's secondary roads? How far do you go? How much removal you want done? How often? Is it till it gets to a certain point?
Yeah, how many inches?
Some areas right away, some areas to a certain point. So the way we're doing it right now is addressing it when it accumulates. And like downtown, it becomes a very costly venture.
Yeah.
And it may sound outlandish, but it could be for a night of snow removal when the snow gets very high. It could be $20,000-$30,000 for one day's work to get rid of that snow. So what would that take to do on an ongoing basis throughout the season? Will it take certain equipment? Will it take more personnel? How does that all work? So if that's High Street, okay. What do we need to do to address all town properties, as the board discussed, all sidewalks around town properties? Hopefully that should be a minimum, like you said, that we're setting an example. And then do we do, not to be repetitive either, Water Street, Main Street, what are the other roads that we want to address? And if, with the help of property owners to do part of it, and then the town takes the excess, what does that take to go through? Is it a machine to try to blow that, and do we put it into trucks to get rid of it? And then the other question is, where do we bring it? We were bringing it to the DPW yard at some points. We were using the athletic field parking lot at one point. The snow collects a lot of debris, as you can see what happens in the city of Boston when they have their mountains. It's half trash. So when it melts, you have another problem there. Are there areas on the land that we have now up at the landfill that it could be brought there? I don't know. That's something Mr. McGowan can help. So those are, you know, a lot of the approaches that I think, like you said, if the board could help guide those priorities, and then we could start coming up with solutions for different levels of what we want to do, and then to see what that cost will be. And whether it's all town-based, whether it's property owner-based, whether it's just funding to do it, or whether it's enforcement on ticketing or towing or whatever that, and then when the police gets involved. So there are a lot of different ideas and solutions that can be made. But I think, like you said, if we could have a discussion about what we should be, what do you want us to do? Then we can come up with those solutions. So I'll ask Chris to, you know, be prepared and kind of think of all these different angles and try to see what he feels if he can put a number or a solution to, and then have the board kind of engage and kind of say, okay, here's our menu, how can we handle this?
And if it's okay with the board, what I'm willing to do, as we've talked about this a lot at our subcommittee, is I'm happy to give Chris and you, you know, some kind of à la carte menu with, you know, things we talked about, and maybe we can, you know, look at phases or things. I don't want to spring it on him either, and I don't think this is going to be a solution that we flip a switch. So I'm sure I don't even know all the complexities involved, but just to give him a little guidance, I can take a look at what we talked about over the past 2 meetings and share it with you and the rest of the board too. So I'm happy to do that if that helps him.
And it all helps with the notices being sent out, and
Yep.
it will help with the marketing or the notification, you know, whether it's through cable and the website and all that, and it just keeps blasting people,
Right.
you know, and again, if that, you know, becomes the points that we want to make, that we have to continually be saying it over and over, you know, over and
Right.
over all year round, and whatever
Repetition,
medium we
yeah.
have to try and get that word out, that's a big help as well too.
And also, I think we should reach out to the school superintendent to find out where the school bus stops are, because there's some major ones in towns where, you know, kids conjure up there to wait for the bus. I know one on Water Street there, I go by it on some mornings when I'm going to work, and you know, some of those snow bankings are pretty hard. It's not even, sometimes it's not even a sidewalk. You should just, the snow piles are hard, and you got people pulling out, and there's kids playing around there, so it's, you know, a lot of safety concerns as well. So I think if we reach out to Dr. Meyer and just get a list of the bus stops, school bus stops, some of the major, you know, throughout the town, the major areas where those kids are being picked up and dropped off as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That's it? Okay. Now, do you want to have a discussion among the board about this issue at the next meeting? I mean, yeah, regardless of, Chris?
is gonna
Yeah,
join
when
us.
he's-
Chris, come back.
Huh?
I'll
Yeah,
see if
Chris.
Chris is able to have enough information at the next meeting with his budget and.
you know,
kinda have
or
an
we could
overall-
decide in what direction we want to go.
Is he here? Is he supposed to be here next meeting for his budget?
Yeah, I was gonna
Okay.
have him in the next meeting, with his budget discussion anyway, so I'll certainly, along with the board, have that discussion. But I agree with the chair that, you know, the board does need to give their thoughts on that, but if Chris is here, then it might be helpful to help that discussion as well.
Okay? All right. Any other committee reports? There being none, that concludes the agenda for tonight.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion's made to adjourn and seconded. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion's carried. Our meeting's adjourned.